brother! Alright, so in case you guys didn't know, or can't tell, my family loves collecting Pluto pins. Look, I even brought some in. Do you want to hear about them? Great, stay tuned. It all started a few years ago when Pluto, who I never had a particular history with, suddenly became like the mascot of our first big family trip to Disney World. It was kind of out of nowhere, but the kids just kept picking out Pluto toys, and we met him over and over, and then me and my wife Beth thought it'd be fun to get like a Pluto ornament to commemorate the trip, and we went to this giant Disney ornament store in Disney Springs, only to discover that despite being one of the sensational 6, there were no Pluto ornaments? I still can't believe that, but whatever. We left that shop feeling honestly defeated, but then stumbled directly into a pin trading store and a brand new family fascination: Pluto pins.
Pluto has sort of been the general theme of the trip, and we've been looking for different like Pluto things, but they've been hard to find, especially pins. But we found this cool pin trader board where you can like trade in pins. So we bought a little starter kit, which comes with Pluto. We're gonna trade 2 of them to get this Pluto pin and this Pluto pin.
Before then, we had never traded pins before, but within an hour had a collection of 4 to 5.
Pin trader update, we got those first 2, but guess what? We just found another pin trader. Now we have, just like that, 4 Pluto pins in almost no time.
And since then, it has exploded. We've managed to visit the parks a few times since then and have outgrown board after board after board of Pluto pins. It's gotten to the point where we're hunting down online auctions, following pinfluencers on Instagram. People are mailing us pins. Heck, Ben and I just collabed with the biggest pin store in Orlando, and now seemingly every member of our family has a specific character they're hunting down pins for, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it is the most collaborative, fun, family-wide hobby we've ever had.
What about aquariums?
Oh, yeah. And aquariums. I actually do enjoy when I'm seeing fish with other people and I'm not around Ben, knowing a lot more about fish than regular people, but still not a lot about fish.
Did you know that the Ocellaris clownfish?
Yeah. Do you know copperbed butterflies are really good at clearing your tank of aptasia? That's my fun fact. Yeah. But seriously, look at this guy. Look, it opens. It's like his locker. He's got little bones inside. It's so cute. Needless to say, I owe a lot to old Pluto, and as you might expect with the pin collecting, has also come just an interest in the full story of Pluto. So I have been trying to learn about his history, and goodness, is he like way more important, not just to Disney, but to like all of animation itself than I realized. And that apparently he wasn't even supposed to exist? Don't worry, it's okay, you do exist. Yeah, today we learned the full crazy history of Pluto. Hey, brother! This one's probably the rarest one I have. It's 1 of 100. It's from Epcot. He's in Germany, and he has a mustache. In case you're wondering. Pluto the Pup, pet of one Mickey Mickford Mouse, is a Disney character that has been beloved for generations. A character who, unlike his counterparts, never speaks, but is somehow still capable of capturing the magic of life and personality like no other. A character who, like I said, was never meant to exist, yet ended up as a blueprint for the evolution of all animation. So let's go back to the beginning. In the fall of 1930, we got our first look at Pluto in the short, The Chain Gang, although you may not recognize him. In The Chain Gang, we see Mickey attempting to escape prison, which I didn't realize Mickey Mouse was a convicted felon, but there's your fun Mickey fact for the day, I guess. Oh, no, prison? Oh, boy. But upon escaping the prison walls, we see the guard tasked to bloodhounds with tracking Mickey down, and this is where it gets interesting. Actually, fun fact, there are some lovely pins from this cartoon that I now realize I must own. Getting back on track. Rookie animator at the time, Norm Ferguson, was tasked with animating these pups, but the way that Norm animated these dogs was unlike anything anyone in the animation industry had ever done or even seen before. In fact, the technique Norm pioneered would go on to be one of what is known as the 12 principles of animation. Which I was gonna try and explain those to you guys, but then I realized we hired someone who majored in animation, so I'm gonna let Isybelle do it.
Hey, brother! So, the 12 principles of animation are the most important foundational tools when animating. These ideas are still utilized and taught in classrooms and studios around the world as the most important considerations when animating characters. What are the 12 principles of animation? You have squash and stretch, anticipation, staging, straight ahead action and pose to pose, follow through and overlapping action, slow in and slow out, arc, secondary action, timing, exaggeration, solid drawing, and appeal. Now, the important thing for Pluto and Norm is the follow through and overlapping action. Norm introduced this technique in the Chain Gang with the animation of the two bloodhounds. If you pay close attention, you'll notice as the character moves, certain parts of the character move at a different speed. For example, loose flesh, such as the dog's floppy jowls or ears, might move at a slower speed than the more solid parts of the character, such as the torso or even the head. These parts of the action might drag behind the main action. The completion of an action, or how the action follows through, is often more important than the character itself. It shows the viewer the associated weight of the character. This might seem like obvious physics to us now, but remember that this was almost 100 years ago, and the technology of animation had only been around for like a brief period of time, and was otherwise rather stiff, as you can see from the other characters in the short. Back to Jay.
Thank you, Isybelle. The unnamed hounds were only intended to appear in that one Chain Gang short, but Walt Disney himself was so impressed with this new technique that he decided to keep exploring the hound dog character. All right, y'all, now we need to take a brief pause. Get it? Right there, let's tell you that today's sponsor, Raycon. I don't know about you guys, but life lately has seemed a little loud. There's just so much going on all the time. So many things to think about and consider. For me, personally, I need to make sure I have a good way to block it all out and take a minute to reset, and that's where Raycon's everyday earbuds come into play big time. Because Raycon has active noise cancellation, capable of drowning out even the most maddening of sounds. Like just this past weekend, I was able to listen to my latest audiobook while doing chores in a totally empty house. Or so it sounded. Of course, I'd say empty, but there were 3 boys fighting zombies with Nerf blasters, complete with like capes and battle cries and swords and maybe a lightsaber. I don't know. I think the zombies won, but it may just because along the way Luke got bit and then turned on the other 2. You know how it goes. But I know what you're thinking. That kind of bliss will simply not last. But not only does the battery life run you for 32 hours, if you do find yourself running low, they have quick charge technology that can turn 10 minutes of charging into 90 minutes of usage. Personally, I use those 10 minutes to briefly join the fray. Maybe I bit Luke. Who's to say? We don't have video record. I mean, I don't want to say I turned the tide or anything, but there were a few less humans by the time I was done. But after all that, if you're not liking Raycons, they offer a 30-day happiness guarantee return policy, no questions asked. So go to buyraycon.com/supercarlin and get 20% off the best-selling everyday earbuds brought to you by Raycon. Buyraycon.com/supercarlin. Link is in the description down below. And now back to Pluto. Whee! And so, sure enough, we see the dog later that year in the cartoon, The Picnic. However, as I'm sure you can tell, we still haven't quite landed on Pluto the Pup as we know him. In this short, rather than the pet of Mickey Mouse, the dog is Minnie's, and his name is Rover, as can be seen above his doghouse. Which, thankfully, they didn't land on Rover as the final name. Like, that is just, like, way too common. Which is also to say I've never met anyone with a dog named Rover, but like, just, you get it. But actually, that's literally the reason. The name change occurred as a result of the name Rover being too common, at least according to Ben Sharpstein, a Disney animator who worked alongside Walt. But so then where did the name Pluto come from? Well, great question, and that answer is actually still debated today. Some animators believe the name was chosen to capitalize on the newly named 9th planet, which had been discovered the previous year in 1930. R.I.P., am I right? You go. While one animator, John Canemaker, claims Pluto was named after Walt's childhood dog, Pluto. But I couldn't find any information to verify that Walt ever had a dog named Pluto, so we'll just keep letting the historians argue over that one. I mean, if it's not named after the planet, though, that means that his childhood dog was named after, like, the god of the underworld. Like that doesn't seem right either, though. This one might be my actual favorite. It is one of 400. It came from D23 last year as part of the Color Shades of Magic. There's like 50 different characters I chose, and all of the paint is supposed to be the color they used for that character. But anyway, while Rover in The Picnic may not be Pluto in name, he is in all other regards other than belonging to Minnie instead of Mickey. The model and personality that was explored in the film is consistent with the personality we see Pluto have even today, though. But then, finally, 1 year later in The Moose Hunt, we officially see Pluto as Pluto. His character model is exactly the same as in his previous appearances. However, this time we see that he is Mickey's dog instead of Minnie's. And it's a little hard to discern, but right after Mickey accidentally, shoots Pluto, okay, Mickey begs Pluto to in fact, and unbelievably, this is the only time Pluto has ever had a speaking line. Upon waking up, Pluto bats his eyes and says, "Kiss me." Okay, well, I'm not gonna lie. Odd first and only words, but whatever. After The Moose Hunt, it was decided that Pluto's character would focus more on physical comedy rather than verbal, which is probably for the best. Especially because this concept ended up being a huge boon for the animators because it allowed or even forced them to explore and gain a better understanding of expressing personality through animation rather than relying on dialogue to flesh out a character. Now, that said, there are a few shorts where we hear Pluto's inner monologue narrated, but even that practice was quickly scrapped in favor of non-verbal humor and storytelling. However, though, even though he doesn't speak, there is an absolutely awesome bit of trivia and tradition surrounding the barks and other sounds that Pluto does make, which is that historically, Pluto has been voiced by whoever the same actor is that voices Goofy.
Gosh.
If you do Goofy, you also do Pluto. This started originally with Pinto Colvig and continues today with Bill Farmer. I freaking love that. That's so cool. This one looks like a rubber duck and actually I need to put this one back where it goes. But from there, Pluto's character really started to come into focus. His creator, Norm Ferguson, actually went on to write a 4-page character bible that would serve as a guide for subsequent animators who would animate the character. And yet again, Pluto was making history here because while character bibles or character sheets were a new practice at the time, they have now become an industry standard and generally, if not always, happens before the character makes it on the screen. Which means, unlike modern cartoons, historians think of Pluto's character as more of a discovery rather than a creation. Like, rather than deciding how a character is going to be and then just animating them that way, they just started making the cartoons and learned who he was along the way. Which I think is kind of beautiful, really. And sure enough, short after short, the animators began unlocking facets of the dog's personality. And actually, here are some of the observations and notes Ferguson made regarding Pluto. Pluto is best appreciated when he is not too smart. His character should always be that of a real dog, with just enough exaggeration to make him a comic. Pluto is nervous and sensitive, easily startled. His feelings are easily hurt when scolded. General conception? Heavy dog. When he starts into action, there is lots of anticipation. Norm even explains how to use his follow-through technique when talking about Pluto's ears. Pluto jumping up in air, instead of having the ears carry through the same distance as the head, the first 2 or 3 drawings of the ears are slower to start. When he lands, the same holds good. The ears are still quite long and they come down with a swoop. In the extreme down, there's a stretch and then they go up in a normal resting position. I'll assume that made sense to Isybelle.
Yes, it did. Good job.
That is why animation is so great, because you're not always trying to be as hyper-real as possible. Lion King. You get to exaggerate and use different rules for expression, but I also love that someone's sitting around thinking about the ways in which this character's specific cartoon physics operate. Moving on though, there's perhaps no other film more associated with solidifying Pluto as a main character in the Mickey Mouse universe than Playful Pluto in 1934. The cartoon was considered a major landmark in the development of character animation. The way the animators captured personality throughout the entire short inspired other animators at the studio and subsequently animators in succeeding generations, because in this cartoon, Pluto is credited as the first animated character to visually think. What happens is, at the end of the short, Pluto finds himself stuck to a piece of flypaper, and you can watch as he attempts to problem solve and free himself. However, his failures result in a continuous line of hilarious gags. Animator Frank Thomas noted, "This was the key to making a believable character, getting the character to think and puzzle out a situation. Pluto was ideal for this." And all of that is, of course, because of the decision to make Pluto non-verbal instead of relying on a character explaining their trouble. Animators were forced to show the viewer the problem and the thought process behind the solution. The short was so well received that 4 years later, Walt had it reshot in color for the short Beach Picnic. Pluto would then even call back to his iconic flypaper sequence in the 1990s, except this time with a newspaper and bubblegum, reminding old audiences and showing new audiences his notable contributions to the medium of animation. That said though, despite his contributions, most of Pluto's screen time is spent as Mickey's pet and subsequently as a side character. However, there are a few pieces of media where Pluto gets the spotlight, such as Pluto's quintuplets, where Mrs. Pluto, otherwise known as Fifi the Peaky,
Piccaninnies, major.
have 5 puppies, and as you might expect, the more Pluto appeared on screen, the more audiences loved him, to the point where in 1942, he was presented with a Oscar for being the most promising dog actor of the year by the Tail Wagger Foundation, a nonprofit organization that assists sick animals, which is already pretty cool and impressive. But then later that same year, Disney won a real Oscar for Best Animated Short Film for Lend a Paw and dedicated the film to the Tail Wagger Foundation. Lend a Paw subsequently is also like a personal favorite of mine, just because it's where these little shoulder angel things came from, because in it, Pluto rescues a cat and then Mickey starts hanging out with the cat and Pluto's like all jealous and he acts on advice from the 2 shoulder angels and, hilarity ensues.
No. He's got a point.
Moving past the 30s though and into the World War II era, you might have expected Donald to be the most featured Disney character. And yes, Donald was being animated into propaganda films and was Disney's biggest star at the time, with Mickey Mouse being sidelined from such features to preserve his innocence in the public eye. Although I don't know who they think they're kidding. Did they not remember that he's a convicted felon? But Pluto did have a role to serve as well and acted as the lighthearted comic relief, finding himself in all kinds of silly wartime situations, and was so beloved that he appeared by request on approximately 45 different military insignias and even outpaced Donald for highest number of shorts at 8 to Donald's 6. Booyah! This isn't military, but it is a watermelon. A limited edition watermelon. But Pluto's time on the big screen was about to come to an end, at least for a while. See, after The Simple Things short in 1953 and the death of Walt Disney, Pluto and the rest of the cast would be put into temporary retirement. Something I didn't even realize ever happened until researching this very video. Obviously, they didn't remain there, as Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Daisy, Goofy, and Pluto are all still very active characters for the Disney brand, but unlike the rest of the cast, Pluto would not appear in another film for nearly 3 decades. Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy, and Daisy reappeared in the 1983 movie Mickey's Christmas Carol, but it wasn't until the 1990s Princess and the Pauper that Pluto finally returned to the big screen. And that pretty much brings us to the present, and for a character that only happened by accident, he managed to make an enormous impact on all of animation and climb his way into the Sensational Six. I mean, not bad for a non-verbal dog who literally appears alongside an anthropomorphic talking dog. Goofy. It's not weird at all, don't worry about it. Pluto also holds the distinction amongst his cohorts for undergoing the least amount of changes in design. First appearing in black and white, of course, then updating to his still traditional brown-yellow with a red collar, and then, the main change since then, buckle your seatbelts, is going from a red collar to a green collar, which very controversial. I mean, not really at all. I love it. And I love Pluto. He arrived into my life somewhat unexpectedly, but has had an undeniable impact. And I'm sure this sounds corny, but dog allergies are a problem in my house, so we can't have a dog. But so in a way, we adopted Pluto as the family dog, which, I don't know, it's kind of cool. Guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. I would love to hear down in the towel section below, who is your favorite member of the Sensational Six, and do you collect Disney pins at all? Because if you don't, it's like super duper fun. If you want to see what the difference is between Goofy and Pluto, you can check out this video right here. That's kind of a vintage one. Enjoy. But otherwise, don't forget to like the video, share it out, and until next time, Ben, I will see you in another life, brother.